Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
This morning is the first Sunday of the month, first Sunday in June, and we're going to be focusing on healing today. And God still heals today. He's the same today, yesterday, and forever. He never changes in what he used to do. He still does. And what he used to think, he still does. What he used to say, he still does. God never changes. God is God. He is who he is. And he does what he does.
And he does it well.
And that's why we love him. Because he does it well. He does it far better than any man ever could. So we're looking at Mark chapter 5 this morning. Mark chapter 5, and starting at verse 1. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes, and when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broke in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus afar, he ran and worshipped him and cried out with a loud voice and said, "What do I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, you do not torment me." For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send him out of the country. Now a large herd of swine were feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then these unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. So those who fed the swine fled and told it to the city and in the country. And there went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came and saw Jesus, and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion, sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it happened to him who had been demon-possessed, and about the swine. And they began to plead with him to depart from their region. And when he saw the boat, and when he got in the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but he said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he has had compassion on you." And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. Well, what does this have to do with healing? Well, it has to do with deliverance, and lots of times sicknesses and diseases are a part of demonic oppression and depression. It can come naturally and it can come supernaturally. And, there are people who are totally out of control, and you'll hear statements from people who say things like, "I don't know what possessed me to do that." Have you ever even said it yourself? "I don't know what possessed me to do that." Well, in reality, you might have been directed by a messenger of Satan to do what you did. There are things that people do and they say they don't remember doing them. They get control, they lose control. There are people who have tempers. I've seen even Christians who say, "You know what, I try to be a good Christian, but I have a bad temper. Maybe it's because I have red hair, or maybe it's because, all of their excuses and all of their reasons. It's passed down through my generations. We're just an angry family, and we just always have bad tempers and everything else. Jesus Christ can deliver you of those things.
Amen.
He delivered this man who had thousands of demons that were possessing him, even to the point where he was able to break chains and shackles off his hands. He was able to scare people off, and he was shouting and howling, and people were afraid of him, wouldn't go near him, didn't want anything to do with him, so he was living amongst the tombs and so on like that. And you know, there's people living on the streets today, and some of them are demon possessed, not all of them, of course, but some of them are. And I was walking down St. Paul Street one day. No, it was King Street, sorry. When we used to have church down on King Street, and I was going across to the bank to deposit some money. And I crossed the street, and there was nobody else on the street but me and this street person. And this street person was standing looking at the bank with his back to me. And I came walking down the street, and the Spirit of the Lord said, I want you to pay close attention. And so I'm wondering what's going on. And I got within a few feet of this gentleman, and he was swearing up a storm, and he was saying Christians are nothing but child molesters, and going on and on about all of this stuff, and how we were so untrustworthy and everything else. And it's like it was like he was yelling at me, but he didn't even turn around and see me. But he was putting down Christians and saying all kinds of awful, nasty things and using horrible language. And I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? Cast him out? And I felt urged just to listen. So I listened, and I walked by the guy. I went into the bank. Nobody else was around. I deposited my money. I came back out. When I went to walk by the guy, he started again. And I said, what was the point of that, Lord? And he said, I just wanted you to know what was out there. That you just never know. But those spirits are aware of the Jesus that's in us. He's aware of the Jesus that's in us, and that's why he was reacting. And so, you know, there are times and seasons for things, and I guess it wasn't time to see that man delivered. And so, but it was a lesson I learned that they do recognize the Jesus in me, that they'll react when I come around. And they'll react to the Jesus in you too. Don't be surprised if somebody's in the grocery line gets real crabby with you real quick, or even a person in the go-through, or you know, a cashier or something like that, that all of a sudden they'll just react to you. And it's the Jesus in you. It's the light shining on the darkness, and the darkness can't comprehend it, and the darkness doesn't like it. But I'm saying all this to say this, that there are people with tempers and people with problems who say, you know, my problems are too big. But this man here, nobody I know has ever been in the shape this man has been in. And Jesus was able to deliver him in a heartbeat. He was able to set him free. And he was sitting there dressed and calm and not attacking people and not screaming at people and not yelling at people. He was normal. And everybody came out to see him. They knew he was the crazy guy. But he was normal. And then when they saw what great power Jesus was walking in, they didn't understand it. And they said, Jesus, get out of here. We don't want you here. This is scary stuff. You know, like this crazy guy was bad enough, but Jesus comes along and he's more powerful than this crazy guy. And so they told Jesus to get out. Well, the man who Jesus had delivered, when Jesus gets into the boat, comes over and says, I want to come with you. I want to follow you. I want to, you know, look what you did for me. I want to serve you. I want to be a help to you. Whatever you want, whatever you need. And Jesus said, no, you're not coming. And he said, why not? He says, because I want you to go back. And the reason he wanted him to go back was he wanted him to be a witness to the power and the glory and the love and the mercy of God. And he sent that man back so that he would live amongst the people, because they knew how wild and crazy he was. That if he would live there, it would be a testimony under the healing power of Jesus Christ. That God loved his people and would set them free. And sometime later, They went and witnessed in that town, and there was great revival. And it all stemmed from this first. So we don't always understand everything that's going on, but there was this first encounter with Jesus, and they kicked him out of town. But later on, he was welcomed after they saw the results, and what had happened was a good thing. Then they wanted more of what Jesus had to offer. But I want to say to you, if you think you've got a problem that Jesus can't help, he can help it. If you've got a bad temper, he can deliver you. He delivered me from mine. I used to have a bad temper. I did things like kick the headlights out of my car when I was mad. It just made matters worse, because then I had to fix my car, you know. But people who lose their temper, they're not always in control, and they do things that they shouldn't do, and so on. God delivered me from that. I don't react that way anymore. If I hit my thumb with a hammer, I don't swear anymore. I don't act the way I used to act. Yes, I jump up and down. And yes, I say ouch, or ow, or ah, but a child could hear me hit my thumb and not be corrupted or offended. And it's a work that God does in our lives, but we have to allow him to do the work and change these things, and we also need to believe that he will change these things and make us to be the people of God that he wants us to be. But he delivered this man, and he can deliver you. He can deliver anybody. He can deliver people that you know that are right out of it and right out there. I do want to share, there was a lady that used to attend many years ago, and she was tormented by demons. She said people were knocking on her door at night, and people were moving around in her apartment at night, and all of these things were happening, and she wanted me to pray for her. So she'd come forward for prayer, and I would pray for her and pray over her apartment, that her apartment would be cleansed and everything, and she'd be all right for a couple of days, and then the next Sunday she'd come for prayer again. And she'd say, the tormentors are back, they're bothering me, they're knocking on my door in the middle of the night, they're doing all this and that. And this went on for several Sundays. And I would pray for her, and things would get better for a couple of days, and then it would fall apart again. And I'm going, what is wrong? What's going on? And so while I was about to pray for this lady, I just felt this word in my spirit, and the word was unforgiveness. And so I said, God just gave me a word for you, and it's unforgiveness. And her countenance changed instantly, and she got angry. And she said, forgiveness, I will never forgive them. Do you know what they did to me, and how they treated me, and how they talked about me? And she just went right off. And I'm sitting there with my mouth open going, wow, did they ever hit that on the button? And I said, well, you know what? The Bible says you got to forgive if you're going to be forgiven.
That's right.
And when we say the Lord's Prayer, we said, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. What we're actually praying is, God, treat us like we treat those who have done bad things to us. So if we're treating people bad who have done bad things to us instead of forgiving them, then we're saying, go ahead, God, treat us badly too. And he does tell a parable about that along the way as well. But anyway, we're supposed to come to that place of forgiveness and releasing. And this woman was tormented, and she ended up leaving the church, and I don't know what had become of her. Last I'd heard, she was in a nursing home. But she was greatly tormented, and the tormentors kept coming because of unforgiveness in her life. If you have unforgiveness in your life, you open yourself up to attacks from the enemy. And that's exactly what happens. We need to be a forgiving people and learn how to release and let things go. When you forgive somebody who's done something evil to you or wrong to you, you're not saying it's all right what you did to me. What you're saying is, I'm not going to be held captive by that any longer. And so I just release you from that, and I put you in God's hands, and God will deal with you over this issue. It's not my problem, it's not my concern. I'm not going to meditate on it, I'm not going to talk about you, I'm not going to complain about you, but I'm just going to let it go. And you know what? A lot of freedom will come from that. A lot of freedom will come from that. When I was a young married man, I had a young family and I had my own business and I was trying to make ends meet and was having tough times and I had a rebellious spirit and I had a wrong way of thinking and I was fighting with other business people and customers and everything else and I'd gotten into a place where I was suing people, people were suing me, and I was losing weight, working long hours, just not getting ahead, frustrated, angry, just losing it. I gave my life to Jesus Christ in the midst of all of that, and all of that turmoil was going on, and I felt the Lord speak to my heart and say, let it go. And I'm saying, but they owe me money and this and that, and they wronged me and so on like that. And the Lord said, let it go. You want peace in your life? Let it go. And so I let it go. And there was a few bills I had to pay off and a few things I had to deal with, but over a short period of time, God delivered me out of financial ruin and balanced things out for me. And I had peace. I was able to sleep at night because I let some things go when I was going to be taking people to court and fighting them and trying to win and all of this. And God says, you don't need to be like that as a Christian. You need to let it go. You know, and there's some things people need to let go in their lives that are causing problems and making life difficult for them. But Jesus can handle it if you can handle this. If you can handle this fella here with that had thousands that were in there. You know, the interesting thing is people will take on demonic allow demonic residents in their lives. But when the demons went into the pigs, what did the pigs do? They committed suicide right away. They jumped in the lake. They thought, I'm not going to live like this. And that's a pig. So some pigs got more brains than some people. Anyway, on about healing. I'm a strong believer in healing. One testimony I do want to share this morning, as far as healing goes concerning me, is when I was taking chemo can cause blood clots, and I didn't know what was wrong with me one morning, but I didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. It wasn't good. I didn't know what I was going to do. And my friend had dropped by. He had borrowed a tool, and he said, you better stay home from the office today. You're just not looking well, and why don't you just lay down and rest? And I thought, that doesn't sound like a bad. My wife was in agreement too. Said, that's not a bad idea. Well, what had happened was I had taken the tool into the shed to put it away. And when I got out there, I got feeling dizzy like you feel when you're laying down and you stand up too fast and all of a sudden your blood drains out and you just kind of just about collapse. Well, I did kind of collapse in the driveway and sat there for a few minutes and got my wind and got back up and went in the house, and that's when they told me you don't look good and better stay home. So I decided to stay home. I slept for about 4 hours. I woke up and went to get off the couch and I couldn't get off the couch, so we phoned my son to take me down to the hospital because I didn't want to make a fuss with an ambulance. And so, make a long story short, I'm falling on the living room floor and I can't get up. My son can't get me out to the car. I just had absolutely no strength. And so they finally called the ambulance, and the ambulance came in and they took me out and took me to the hospital, and they thought I was having a heart attack, but I wasn't. Turns out they find out I have a blood clot that's blocked my lungs. Well, that's fine. I get over that one. They give me blood thinners, and a few days later I was released from the hospital in record time, back on my feet real quick. And I ended up in the hospital another time for another reason. And when I was in the hospital, the doctor that was there, that was dealing with me on the issue of that day. And when the doctor came in, he's holding a sheet of paper and he's looking at me. And he's looking at me real funny, and I said, is something wrong? And he said, I thought you said you had a blood clot. And I said, I did. He says, you didn't have a blood clot, you had a blood mass. I says, well, what does that mean? He says, it's like a bunch of blood clots together, all moved up and hit the bottom of your lungs and closed everything off, and you weren't getting any oxygen, and that's why you didn't have any energy. And he said, the only time we ever see blood masses like this is in autopsies. And he says, I'm looking at this paper and I can't believe that you're sitting in front of me alive today.
Praise God.
Praise the Lord.
God is amazing. And I know by that you're not going anywhere before your time if you're
That's
serving
right.
the Lord.
Amen.
Right.
Because he said you should have been dead by what I'm looking at on this paperwork. You should be dead. And you're alive, and I can't believe it. That's why I had to come up and look at you and see if this was really you on this form. That's me, and that's my God. That's my God. He's a wonderful God. And I have no fear of the day I'm going to die, because the day I'm going to die is the day I'm supposed to die. It's the day that God is calling me home to be with Him. And so I'm ready whenever the time comes, but I'm not worried about it. But God heals today.
Yes.
And I've got several other healing testimonies I can give you too, but that's the one I'm sharing for today. And I do want to read on into some more, verse 18, and it says, and when he got into the boat, I read that about telling the man to go back. Okay, verse 21. Now when Jesus crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and begged him earnestly, saying, my little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live. So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now, the interesting thing about this is he's one of the rulers of the synagogue, and the synagogue was against Jesus and his teachings and everything that was going on, and yet this ruler of the synagogue comes and he falls at his feet and begs him earnestly to come and heal his daughter. And so this man is really stepping out, because everybody in the synagogue is against Jesus. And he goes out there and starts asking Jesus for healing for his child. And so while he's doing that, Jesus says, yeah, I'll come. And there's a great multitude following him and thronging him. So he's in the big crowds. And I don't know if you've ever been to a concert or you've ever been into something where there's just large crowds and everybody just pushing and squeezing and you can't move. And, and that's kind of what was going on with Jesus. Now, and it goes on to say, now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. And she had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. And that reminds me of when I went for chemo. They did to me what they could do to me, and they made me worse instead of better. And that was just a waste of money as far as I was concerned. I'm glad OHIP paid for it and not me. But anyway, with this woman here, she's going to all kinds of doctors, and she's spending all of her money trying to get well, and she's just not getting well. And when she'd heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if only I may touch his garment, I shall be made well. Well, that's the point of her faith. She's got it in her mind. If I can just get through this crowd, think about it, the crowd is so thick that nobody can get through. But she forced her way through this crowd to get to the front, to get to where Jesus was. And so she fought her way to the front of the crowd. There was lots of reasons why she shouldn't do that. For one thing, sick people were not allowed out in public, and especially not in crowds. But she pushed her way through those people and said, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, if I could just touch it, I would be healed. And she was determined, and she forced her way through that crowd so she could touch him. And when she touched him, it says immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. So she knew immediately by how she felt, without checking, that she was healed. And Jesus immediately, knowing in himself that power had gone out from him, turned around to the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." And you know, there's a lot of people talking about healing and so on today, and they say you gotta speak your faith, you gotta speak the truth. Well, that's true, you do need to speak it. And that woman was speaking it, but she also put action behind her faith. She didn't just say, "If I touch the hem of his garment," but she went after touching the hem of his garment. She put legs to her faith, and she went after what she believed. And you know, you need to go after what you believe when it comes to the area of healing. You need to believe God is a healer and that he will heal you. If you don't believe that, don't expect results. But you've got to believe it in your heart and confess it with your mouth. The same as salvation, you've got to believe it in your heart and confess it with your mouth. Anything you want that God has promised, you've got to believe in your heart and say with your mouth. Some people say you just got to say it and say it over again until you convince yourself. No. Spend time in the Word, because faith comes by hearing and hearing by the Word of God. Build up your faith in the area where you have a need, and then believe God to meet that need. But you've got to believe it in your heart. That woman took an awful chance fighting her way through the crowd, because she was sure in her heart, if she just touched Jesus, she'd be healed. She was sure. And so she did it. She, you know, people might have beat her or kicked her or done all kinds of things if they found out she was a sick woman walking through the midst of the crowds. But she was willing to pay that price to get in there and touch Jesus. And he says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your afflictions." And that word "be healed" means keep being healed. Keep standing on it, keep believing it. Don't let it come back on you. Keep believing, keep standing. Be healed. And so that woman is taken care of because of her faith. And you know, sometimes people are standing in their faith. And the scripture tells us when you're standing by faith, having done all, continue to stand. Because there are times when we have to wait for our faith, like faithful Abraham, who had the promise of a son. And this promise of a son took 25 years to manifest. That's a long time to wait for the answer to come. That's a long time to stand by faith, believing God is going to give you a son. But that's what he did, is he waited 25 years. And sometimes you want something immediately from God, and sometimes it doesn't come immediately. Even though you think it should, and you can give God all the reasons why it should. You know what I'm talking about. It's God's timing, not yours. But having done all, you need to stand. Stand and be a witness. Stand for what you believe in. And if you're having trouble believing anything that the Word of God says, then keep reading it over and over and over again and believe God. You must believe that God is, and you must believe that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, because he is. He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And you seek his word, and you seek his truth, and you seek his promises. And I believe that's why I'm alive today, is because I'd spent time in the Word. And God had imparted things to me that I did not know, that when I was facing death, I was not afraid. I was shocked at how peaceful and calm I was. And actually both my wife and I were, even when we were in the doctors and they said I was dying. And they are looking at us and saying, "Are you understanding what we're saying? Did you hear what we said?" "Yes." And they're looking at us funny, like they're expecting us to break down or do something, and it's like, okay, well, here's something we have to deal with, isn't it? You know, you just take it to God and see where it goes from there. And so anyway, this woman is healed of her affliction. And while he was speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" See, it's too late. The girl has died. Jesus was coming to lay hands on her, pray for her, to raise her up from her sickness, but now she's dead. It's too late. It's too late for God. Is it ever too late for God?
No.
No, it's never too late for God. It says, "Why do you trouble the teacher any further?" And as soon as Jesus heard the words that were spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid. Only believe." Only believe. Don't be afraid, only believe. Believe what? Believe God's truth. Believe God's mercy. Believe God's healing power. Believe God's love. Do not be afraid, only believe. And that's all you got to do. Only believe. That's one of the hardest things we do. But only believe is something that we have to do. And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and he saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. Then he came in and he said to them, "Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. And when he had put them all outside, he took the father and mother of the child and those who were with him, Peter, James, and John, and entered where the child was lying. And he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha, Talitha, Kumi, Kumi," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." You didn't know I could speak Aramaic, did you? "Okay, little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and that something should be given to her to eat. And so they had come to Jesus and said, "Jesus, it's just too late. It's too late. She's dead. If she was alive, you could stop her sickness, but now the sickness has killed her. It's too late. So why do you bother? Let's just go home and bury our dead." Well, I want to tell you something about God's timing. There are times when we put time limits on God and say, "You know what, I need the money by 5 o'clock today. God, I need this money and I need it now. If it's not here by 5, then I may as well give up on this situation." And 5 o'clock comes and you don't have it, and then you're mad at God and say, "God, why didn't you get it on time? You knew I needed this," and everything else like that. Then you'll find something worked out the next day, and it was all taken care of. And then you got to go to God and repent and say, "You know what? God took care of me after all, but it didn't have to be in my time. It just had to be in his time." But he's able to do things when they need to be done. He's able to do things when they need to be done. He knows better than we do. He knows the beginning from the end. But never put limits on God to say, "You got to do this by then." Because if you're believing God will do it, then you just continue to stand and believe. And even when you go past the point where the line has been drawn, God can move lines. He can move lines. And he can do things amazingly with situations and circumstances that will drop your jaw to the floor. Because he's such an awesome God, and there's nothing impossible with him. And so, when it comes to healing, he's healed me. He's healed lots of people I've prayed for. I've seen people not get results, I've seen people die that we've prayed for as well. I don't understand and know all things, but I do know this. If anybody's gonna get anything from God, it's gonna be me. I have that determination. I have that determination. If God's gonna do it for anybody, He's gonna do it for me. If He's done it for somebody else, He'll do it for me. I'm one of His children. He's created me. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and I am part of His creation. And He has good things in store for me, and I believe that, and I stand on that, and I expect that to come to pass. I say it all the time. I believe it all the time. And you know what? You should be doing the same thing yourself, is believing. If you believe God is, He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him, then diligently seek Him. Check out His word. Follow after. And don't get frustrated and don't get angry, because when you do